In news this week, veteran trainer Bruce Marsh has called time on his 14-year training career in Singapore as he sends out his last team of runners at Kranji tonight. The expat Kiwi has enjoyed great success in Singapore, including Group 1 winners War Affair, Hello and Goodbye and Race Ahead. The former Melbourne Cup winning jockey is looking forward to helping son Stephen, whilst also getting involved in the bloodstock side of racing, sourcing horses for clients in Singapore. Probabeel will have a new jockey in Saturday's Tea Rose Stakes at Randwick. Kerem McAvoy will replace James McDonald on the Kiwi filly after McDonald decided to stay with the Chris Waller-trained Fun Star following her first up run. In further news, Avondale has also arrived in Sydney with a second up assignment in the Group 3 Bill Ritchie Stakes over 1,400 metres at Randwick on Saturday. The depth of the New Zealand breeding industry was on display again last week when former champion New Zealand sprinter Bounding kicked off her broodmare career with gusto. Her first foal by dual US Horse of the Year, Curlin, was the subject of a spirited bidding duel before being knocked down to Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum of Godolphin for $4.1 million at Keeneland's September yearling sale in Lexington, Kentucky. Bounding was a $1.9 million purchase herself by Barbara Bank of Stone Street Farm. And finally, Sir Michael Stout's star horse Crystal Ocean has been retired following a career-ending leg injury. The winner of 8 from 17 and more than £2 million in prize money was named world's best racehorse after landing his first Group 1 at Royal Ascot in June. He is probably best known in this part of the world for this titanic battle with superstar mare Enable.
She's just in front, Enable, racing up towards the line, and she'll win a second King George. What a race! That was a horse race. Crystal Ocean edged out second.
A horse race is exactly what it was. They went toe-for-toe up the straight and Enable was just too good. Watch out for her in the Arc. A special mention as well, Michael, must go to Russell Cameron, who passed away last week after a battle with Alzheimer's. And he trained here in New Zealand, and it's a really big loss.
Yeah, a really popular guy. I'm sure you would have known him better than I did, but Russell, one of those guys who always seemed really on for a chat and dry sense of humour, and just one of those guys in racing who everybody liked.
Terrific bloke. Well, we stayed with him at Flemington. Well, you stayed, Emily, as well, numerous times, and you could see his mental health starting to go wayward towards the end, and he was deteriorating, which was a great shame because he was a very sharp trainer and a good horseman.
All right, that's obviously thoughts with Russell Cameron's family. Bernard Saundry, we've been teasing it all week, and he is here in the studio. Bernard, welcome into the show. Great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me on, Emily, Michael and Sean. Great to be here.
Let's sort of jump straight in head first. Murray Baker came out a couple of weeks ago with some comments about the stakes in New Zealand, saying that it was going to be 2 years before we saw any increase, and perhaps in 2020 the stakes were going to go down. Let's just start by addressing that and what you made of those comments.
Well, first of all, there's no doubt we all want more stakes because prize money equals jobs. And over the last couple of years, we've been distributing prize money through the TAB, really with money we haven't earned. So we've got some surgery to do, I'd have to say, for the first 12 months. But clearly, the new revenue streams that the government have put in place, the race fields, point of consumption charge, and the gambling duty, will allow us to increase prize money. The exact timing of that will be dependent upon the performance of the TAB, the current performance, and we'll know more about that in the next 2 or 3 weeks. By the end of September, we will see the results for 18-19. We've been given a clear direction for 19-20 that stakes are to remain the same as was in 18-19 into 19-20, and the Reta Board have put that in place. So that's a good thing. When those stake money increases will apply will depend upon the timing of the regulations and the balance sheet of the Reta Board.
Okay, so stakes aren't going to go down?
For this season, no.
For the season after?
No. Well, it will depend upon the performance of the TAB, and I don't see them going down. The challenge is for the current performance of the TAB to remain in place.
Okay.
So if we can hold what we've got today, the new revenue streams, which for thoroughbred racing circa $9 or $10 million, with 70% of that should be going into stakes. So I'm working very hard with the Reta Board to make sure that the performance of the TAB doesn't go backwards, And if it doesn't go backwards, those revenue streams can go back into the industry. And we've got prize money as number one priority, and our clubs who haven't had an increase in any funding for 7 years is the second priority.
We've had now a year since the Mercer Report came out. A lot of people in the industry, Bernard, are frustrated by the pace of change or the lack of change. Having been involved in administration in a place like Victoria where there was radical change, is this normal? Is it going too slow here? And what are the impediments to making it go faster?
Yeah, I'm hearing that a lot, Mike, and I absolutely understand that. But I think in racing you have to play the long game. And I know it's been frustrating for a lot of New Zealand participants over a number of years. But I've seen the Mercer Report be completed, out for consultation, report finalised, the MAC group appointed, the RETA board appointed, and we're now in what I call implementation of the Mercer framework. And I'm hoping, what I'm seeing is as long as we can hold the current performance and we don't go any further backwards than where we are today, that we will see stake increases in 2021.
We have we had the Mercer Report, and we all went to that meeting in Claudelands that day, and I think Winston Peters, who, God bless him, he's probably the only one in government who gives us any real support or has any real care about racing. And he said in that meeting, and I quote his words, that the racing board was a dead duck and that we needed to change, and we've got this RETA in transitional now. Can you just explain to us, just so everyone's clear here, as a trainer, and there's a lot of trainers who don't understand exactly what RETA's role is, how the racing board formulates through that, and how the NZTR work under that complex. So what's RETA's key job, and how do they have power over the racing board, or are they part of the racing board? Or?
Well, the RETA board replaced the New Zealand Racing Board, the directors on that board, and they've been empowered by the Minister over the next 12 months to implement the Mercer Report, and that's exactly what they're doing. So we've got 12 months to transition to the Mercer framework, and anything else the RETA board think that's applicable for the racing industry. And I'm looking towards the end of 1920 to have the right levers in place, and I'm absolutely convinced the industry's got 3 levers. One lever is the new revenue streams we've just created in the last set of legislation, race fields, point of consumption, wagering duty. Second, and NZTR have been very strong on this, that's advocating for joint venturing the TAB with an international wagering operator, so we've got a balance sheet that can invest into retail, into on-course, and grow our customer base in New Zealand. And then the third bit is the venues, and I know we're going to talk about that today, but I believe that the industry has an opportunity, but NZTR can't do that on its own. It needs to work in partnership with clubs to deliver the financial outcomes in that space. So I see 3 key revenue pillars that NZTR have been advocating for and will continue to advocate for.
Mate, the racing board came out and said that at the start of the year, John Allen projected $170 million to go through. Then we had this roadshow that he went on and explained to us that it didn't take off, as we all know, with the betting platform, the new fixed odds betting platform, and we will now have 155 million. And we're now hearing that it's going to be significantly south of that. How are we going to sustain stakes with a product that's going down?
Well, we'll know more. That's a good question, and I'm not privy to the absolute details. But what we do know is the RETA board's got a pretty clear direction: is don't let stakes go down this year. This is in 1920, and don't leverage your balance sheet. So within those 2 bookends, for want of a better word, we've got a job ahead of us.
Do we need an injection of money from an outsourcing from the TAB, in your opinion?
I'm a big supporter of a JV. I've worked in a JV for 25 years, and the environments I've worked in, the Victorian racing industry has been better off for it. It creates a commercial tension that doesn't exist in New Zealand today.
One of the key issues for a lot of trainers, and I fully respect trainers and owners and their staff, are suffering financially. One of the key things people hate is the fact that we have a fixed odds betting platform, for want of a better word, which cost a lot more money than people thought. And that money may be between $40 and $50 million, depending on who you ask. Once you've got that, and we now have it as part of the system, just so you and I have discussed this before, but for those people watching at home, you can't just dismantle it, can you? You can't turn it off and say, well, let's forget about that. Now we've paid for the thing, it's got to stay. Is that your view on it?
Well, it's an asset that's had an investment from the New Zealand racing industry, and any international operator that could come along could have effectively used that platform integrated with other jurisdictions. So, yeah, don't get me wrong, this is a big challenge ahead of us. We've got a big challenge ahead of us.
I need to ask you a question and try and answer it as non-politically as possible. Are there too many factions in New Zealand racing? The people at this table, the people watching at home, want the same thing. We all want exactly the same thing. More money, more share, more stakes. I have found in my dealings with this, there are teams building. One team wants one thing, one team wants another thing. They don't like each other and they're working against each other. Is that how you're finding the experience?
Certainly coming to New Zealand, it is very much personality driven rather than focused on running a business. So I do find that very different. We've got to achieve an outcome. We've got to improve prize money. We have to improve our tracks, and we have to improve the opportunity for people to go to the races, and that should be our sole focus. To me, nothing else matters. And yes, I think we do find that the personality gets in the way of making appropriate business decisions.
Isn't that a leadership issue? Isn't it any situation, because people run entire countries, isn't this an issue where the leadership, whether it's of NZRB or RETA as it may now be called, or NZTR, if these people are unable to speak to each other or come to these conclusions for the betterment of racing, they should stand down? Because I'm finding at my level, Bernard, there are all these teams who are unwilling to talk to each other, and that's what leadership is. It's bringing people together for a common cause. I don't believe that's happening. Do you think there's the right people leading NZTR, for example?
Yes, I do, and I think you'll find that one thing that I've noticed since arriving in New Zealand, the whole structure isn't conducive to making appropriate business decisions, because the wagering operator was, call it the old NZRB, was also involved in doing code-related activities. A wagering operator should be selling the next bet, should be developing the next customer base. Not be let the codes worry about their code businesses. Let the codes worry about delivering a racing program to the wagering operator, and let the codes worry about distributions to clubs and participants.
I need to ask you about...
And that's got to be very clear, because at the moment there's some grey area in that space at the moment.
I need to ask you about one of the elephants in the room. One of the recommendations of the Mercer Report was the vesting of Avondale for a figure which we'll put at $200 million for the betterment of the industry. And a lot of people out there watching the show want that to happen. Avondale have come out and said we're not interested in that happening. Has NZTR taken a legal opinion on whether they can actually vest the $200 million out of Avondale for the betterment of the industry, or whether that's actually illegal?
It's very clear. It's the club's asset. And we are encouraging and have had a couple of meetings with the three clubs, and we've got another meeting with the three clubs this Friday to talk through what does the future of Auckland racing look like. And like the Waikato clubs have done, Waipa, Cambridge and the Waikato Racing Club, they've engaged together. We want the same to happen with the Auckland clubs, and we're asking the same for to happen in the Taranaki region.
So just to clarify that, you don't see a vesting of this where basically this asset is sold for this figure of maybe $200 million and the money goes to the industry unless their board votes for that? Is that what your legal opinion said? Because at the moment, that was a key tenet of the Mercer Report. Forget outsourcing to the TAB. That's not going to make you $200 million. But that's what it said.
The clear recommendation in Mercer was that the industry needed to do that. It needed legislation. NZTR or NZRB haven't got that legislation today.
Okay, so at this stage that can't happen.
That's
because
right.
There seems to be a thought process that can, and I don't think it can.
Correct.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if the Auckland Racing Club, counties, geez, even Ruakaka perhaps, and the Avondale Jockey Club, combined like the STC and the AJC did and made it an ATC? Now that would be perfect for the industry. No, but look, Avondale's been an integral part of New Zealand racing for a long period of time, as is other clubs that we're looking to shut down. But the greater good is the whole industry.
You're a trainer. Are you comfortable with it closing?
Look, I think Avondale must be stayed there while we get Ellerslie right. We don't race at Ellerslie for 4 months of the year, and that's disappointing. We see this racing at Flemington and Caulfield and Moonee Valley. If we can inject some money to make sure that Ellerslie, whichever track you prefer to have race on, is sustainable 12 months of the year, we probably don't need Avondale.
That segues nicely into Cambridge and synthetic tracks. We believe that Cambridge is going to get a synthetic track put in there. What's the update on that?
So we're very close in finalising that arrangement with the government. We've got one little condition that we have to meet, and then the government will be able to make some announcements.
I take that would be a licence to race, because obviously it's changing from a training facility to a race facility, so
Correct.
that would need to be a resource consent?
Resource consent. So we've had terrific support from the trainers at Cambridge. We've had a project team on it for the last 10 months, and the Cambridge committee are contributing to the project. And but the final, what I'll call peg, to make this happen is with the support of the government, and they've been very open to the way they want this to occur, and Sir Winston Peters has made that very clear, the way he wants it to happen.
What about greenfields, which is a totally different thing? Obviously they're talking about a synthetic track at Cambridge, which we are hoping is going to happen. The greenfields project, where we see some tracks close and this new facility start, where is the progress or lack of for that at this stage?
Yeah, so the three clubs have come together, Cambridge, Waipara and the Waikato, have also appointed PwC to do a feasibility study, and that feasibility study will be finalised October or November this year. So yes, everyone wants everything to run quicker than what it is. The reality is we're talking about hundreds of years of history. We're talking about people have got ingrained positions. We want to make sure we know there's a better world for thoroughbred racing, and we want the clubs to drive some of this change with us. And so the two discussions that have started to occur, that haven't happened in my understanding for 20 years, we've got three clubs in the Waikato talking together, and we've got three clubs in the Auckland region wanting to talk to each other. So that's a positive. I hope in 12 months' time I could sit at the table with you, three of you, and say, look at what is possible for the next 10 years of racing in both those regions. And there's no doubt we need two world-class facilities, one in the Waikato, racing and training, that can house 2,000 horses, have a 2,400 metre grass track, a 2,000 metre synthetic track, and then in Auckland we need an international venue to be recognised, not only for New Zealanders but for Australians and people internationally to bet with confidence, and that's all possible. But it needs some common sense, some clear thinking, and some good people to come to the table to make that happen.
I just wonder if we've got as much time as we perhaps need. And we've got trainers out there, the older generation of trainers, and geez, they call me a young trainer and I'm nearly 50. That's because most of the trainers are older than me. And these guys, okay, they're racehorse trainers, but they're not really. They're property developers. They've had land from when they were young, they've managed to buy land, and that's where their profit is. You know, I charge, I don't mind saying, I charge $75 a day to have a horse trained, and my margin is nothing. I have to sell horses or win races to make money. And, you know, I'm certainly not at the bottom level.
So tell me, what do your cohorts, your fellow trainers, who I've got nothing but respect for, I wouldn't get out of bed that time in the morning, especially for that money. How do they feel? What do they want to happen next?
The two things I find most of all when I go to these meetings is, number one is the frustrations kicking in now. We have a board over the last 5 years, and I'm talking about the racing board, who have gone from 11 million of the expense of running racing to 24 million, and while the revenue coming in is going down. Now that leaves something around the 59 million mark for thoroughbred and stakes. That's offensive. 21 million to run the game and 59 million going to thoroughbred stakes, simply not enough. And accountability. Nobody knows. I mean, we have no general accountability about who is responsible or who is going to take this to the next level. Now, the reader board have just come in and we have to back those. We've sat through CEOs after CEOs telling us how they're going to grow the customer product and how they're going to do this and do that. And it just simply hasn't been working. And if something goes wrong in my stable, if I have a horse get beat, the stewards come in, they ask me questions and I'm accountable. If I have a track work rider who buggers up a gallop and does things wrong, as Stephen McKee found out very recently, you are held accountable. We have nobody accountable in this game for some very poor decisions over a long period of time. And the faith in the corporate product for us is very ordinary. And I'm not a corporate. I don't understand the corporate world. But I know when I'm running a business and I have horses and I'm getting my business becoming smaller because I'm losing horses, I certainly don't send my expenses up and employ more people. We just don't get it.
Is it a lack of communication? Are the trainers and the horse people in this country not being given enough information about what's happening? Because we're asking Bernard questions here, and we could ask John Allen from what's now Retail or the Racing Board. There seems to be a lack of actual information to trainers about where their future's going.
I think it's certainly slow coming through, and I understand there's a process of these things, but I don't think a lot of trainers, and I've been to a few trainers' AGMs recently, realise how close to the line we are financially. They really don't. We just look back and say, this is a big industry. It's $1 billion industry. We can't collapse. We can. We are not making money, and we are very, very close to the line. And that's not just small livelihoods, that's the whole racing game.
Many industry participants will have noticed an increased presence on track from Love Racing. Do you feel you're straying from the core business of racing administration?
Well, I think it's really important that someone promotes thoroughbred racing, and in the racing board model, the old racing board model, that was partly done. And in the new model going forward, where it has to be code-led, someone's got to take responsibility for developing out the profile of New Zealand thoroughbred racing. So, I'm very, very strong that someone's got to do it. The Love Racing brand has been out in the marketplace, was done 2 or 3 years ago. So when I come into the job, we didn't have to create another brand. It was sitting there, and we've got 64,000 people monthly coming to that site.
Let's talk about track closures and the future venues plan. This time last year, there were going to be 20 galloping tracks closed. A re-release of the future venues plan in January saw some of those not closing. We've gone from 10 potentially to 7, which will close this season. This is a difficult question to ask without sounding rude. Do NZTR have the power or the final say over which tracks will close, or has that now been ceded to Rita, who have been given this power to basically be in charge of New Zealand racing, full stop? Who gets to have the final say on what stays open and what closes?
NZTR.
So what say, for example, Stratford, which is closing, say, OK, we're closing down, you're not getting a licence. Then Rita say, well, actually, if you can show a good business plan, you can stay open. What say that happens?
Well, that's not my understanding of the way it's going. It has worked, it is going to work.
Because I think one of the problems, Bernard, is that as we see some of the tracks in the South Island that would close, is if I said to most people who's in charge of New Zealand racing, they wouldn't know. Now, technically it's the Minister, but we know he's Deputy Prime Minister and is too busy to look after New Zealand racing. Who do you think's in charge of New Zealand racing? Actually, I'll make it easier. Who's in charge of New Zealand thoroughbred racing?
Well, the NZTR board are, and is funded by the NZRB, now Rita, under an old structure that hasn't worked, because that's why we're sitting in the position we are today. And that's why Masara was appointed. And the Minister was right. The industry is terminal. And a club president the other day said to me, yes, we need major surgery. So I don't think there's any doubt what Sean's saying is right. We need to quickly implement the Masara review, and I do say play the long game. This thing can't be turned around in 12 or 18 months. There is a commitment from all parties over 4 or 5 years. Prize money is the number one priority. And in fairness to the Rita board, they focused on the revenue generating opportunities to deliver improvements in prize money. So I understand there's a level of frustration from Sean and the trainers. I'm hearing that every day. But the Mercer Report will articulate and demonstrate the role of the codes versus the role of the wagering operator. And that's the world I've come out of. And the quicker we get to that, the better off we'll all be. That includes joint venturing, the TAB, and getting these 3 new revenue streams in place that can deliver improvements in prize money on the basis that we hold the current performance of the TAB. And that's going to be a challenge also.
We have barely scratched the surface of the chat with Bernard. Unfortunately, that's it for us on Weigh In, but we are going to keep Bernard in the studio, and he's very kindly going to sit down with us, and we're going to be able to ask him some more questions, and look out online for that a little bit later on. That is Weigh In this week. We'll join you next Sunday, 10 a.m.